Today we're going to be learning about one of the German longsword master blows known as the Krumphau with my special guest Jeff Tsay. Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. Now, I don't make any pretenses about being an expert in German swordplay, but I have an expert in German swordplay here, Jeff Tsay from Forte Swordplay in the USA, who's visiting at the moment. He's going to be teaching a class tonight at one of my clubs. Now, you've been studying Liechtenauer lineage German swordsmanship for a long time, haven't you? As well as other things.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's been an area of focus,
Yeah, and so we've both been in the HEMA-verse for a similar amount of time, I think. Long time. We're quite long in the tooth now. Well, I am anyway. But so I thought, what a great opportunity to give you guys a little bit of an explanation of some aspects of German swordsmanship. So what we're going to be talking about here, and I specifically asked Jeff about, is the Krumphau. Tell me more about the Krumphau. So, first of all, the name, what does it mean?
So, as you know, when we're looking at etymology and translation, it can be tricky because a lot of the time we are taking a native word and trying to translate and distill all of that meaning into one word, which may not capture all the nuance. So, I think typically people will translate it as crooked, a crooked cut, but there are things like, it's sort of the same root as crumble, like Crimp, crumble. So I think that gives you maybe a way to sort of like get a feeling of like, maybe if you don't like crooked, maybe bent, maybe arc, things along those lines.
Okay.
Not straight, actually, is maybe a good way to think about it.
Not straight.
Yeah.
So bent, crooked, crumbled, this sort of,
exactly.
So it's more of a concept, and often, and we should mention this with all historical languages, it's not always possible to make a direct translation from medieval languages.
It's hard to remember. It's hard to remember, yeah.
So the Krumphau, which is the Meisterhau that we're looking at, in a sentence or two, what is a Meisterhau? So this is one of the Meisterhau.
Yeah.
What are the Meisterhau as a group?
I feel like, as you and I have been doing this stuff for a long time, the more that we learn, the more we realize there's nuance to all these things. So the most succinct thing I can say about the master cuts is they are sort of like key, both mechanical but also tactical highlights of the system, of things that you want to be able to do to both sort of defend yourself and offend the opponent as sort of like efficiently as possible. And there could be many things that actually kind of fall into that category, but these are probably like the bread and butter things that really define the system.
And so for anyone who hasn't heard that expression before, Meisterhau, we could translate this as master blows or master cuts,
sure.
Master strikes. So these are a specific set of techniques of which the Krumphau is one. So let's have a look at the Krumphau.
Sure.
Let's see what it is.
Sure, yep. Or at least one interpretation.
One interpretation. And this is why I picked the Krumphau, because there are other interpretations. We should probably make that clear.
Absolutely.
Some people maybe disagree with this interpretation, and they're welcome to post below. And but anyway, this is Jeff's interpretation. I don't know much about the Meisterhau other than the basic concept, and I know that you've got some others, incidentally, like the Schielhau, the Zwerchhau,
Swordhau, Scheitelhau. Yeah.
So it's like a collection. It's like a repertoire of special master moves, and this is one of them, the Krumphau. Let's have a look at it.
Yeah. So this one is pretty cool because it's a good way to think about, from my perspective, like how do we defend in a way which is very efficient and actually, even though it sort of starts you in a sort of defensive crouch kind of mentality, easily pivots you to an offensive position like immediately afterward if you do it well. And depending on the situation, you can even pivot very quickly from defense into offense, and I'll try to show that as part of what we're doing here. So part of this is going to be about the mechanics. Part of it is just trying to understand what are the motions that are sort of typically associated with Krumphau, but then we'll talk a little bit about the tactics as well. So, all right, so if I have Matt here as my opponent, so one of the bread and butter things with the German tradition is also the Zornhau. So a wrath cut where, typically, that is translated as, this wrath cut or wrath strike. And it's going to be a very organic thing for most people. Shoulder, a sword on your shoulder, and you're going to cut wrathfully to someone's head, right? And usually with a step, so that you end up, when you're cutting from the right, you're going to step with your right, so the right foot is forward. So something like this, and we're going to make sure that the distance is good and all of this stuff. So I'm going to have you step back a little bit more, and make sure, step back a little bit more and just make sure, do that again, and just full extension, and you know, you're hitting with the weak, the foible here on my head. So that distance is good. So, so in a minute, I'm gonna show the angles on this because it does matter. But the idea is rule number one, when the cut's coming in, here's the danger. So a good rule of thumb, and again, these are rules of thumb, we can break these rules at later dates as we better understand the mechanic, but rule number one, get away, right? So typically, the sources will say spring away. So that spring away could be here, it could be here, it could be here. But the idea is I'm not doing this, right? I'm not going this way, I'm gonna go this way. So I'm gonna land with my right leg, I'm stepping with my right leg. And what you know, one reason that it could be called the crooked cut, notice that Matt is cutting nicely aligned, so his right shoulder, right hip, right foot are all aligned, and therefore like he's gonna have good extension, like his longest extension this way. When I cut my cut, instead of cutting this way, I'm gonna cut this way, right? So even though I'm on my right here, I'm cutting from my left. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand. A lot of people will start here and cut from their right to a left side position.
Should we show that from a different angle?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Hopefully the people on.
So we can definitely show it from here. Sometimes it's good from sort of behind my shoulder, so we can do a couple different things. So we're talking about this, not this, here, okay? So if you think about what's going on, Matt cutting from that right angle, from his right, and me cutting from that left angle, we're conceptually effectively cutting the same plane. We're in danger of cutting in the same plane. If you think about that from a sort of default logic perspective, why on earth would you want to cut against a cut in the same plane? Right? That feels sort of logically like an automatic setup for a double hit. You know, like I hit Matt and he hits me. So the cool thing about the Krumphau is that by doing it this way, and the Zettel, the verses, this didactic poem from Master Liechtenauer that's written down, the various versions of it all talk about, I'm trying to take my edge and strike it to the flat of the masters, right? So Zornhau is one of the masters. When he comes in, like I can cut this way, right? And getting the edge, which is along the strong axis of the blade, against the flat, which is sort of that weak axis of the blade, can be very, very disruptive, okay? So that alone is really, really effective. But what's even more effective is if I use a second dimension, right? So when that cut comes in again, instead of going completely perpendicular or orthogonal, if I then use the same idea, and I'm not doing flat on flat, what I'm doing is I'm shaving with my edge along the flat, all of a sudden, this is the effect, right? So I'm gonna do it a little bit slower. I'm gonna catch this early and have all of this extent to basically provide pressure into the sword, into the opponent. And by the time I get from his weak or foible to his strong or forte, I'm taking away a lot of energy, away.
Should we try showing that from a different angle? Maybe this way around as well.
Sure. Let's see. So actually, if you go this way, this idea. So I am taking away that energy as I'm also fading away. Now, so here's the thing. If Matt is really committed and he's really pissed off at me for whatever reason, and he comes in, sure, this does a lot. The issue though is that if you think about sort of, so if you come on in, then we talk a little bit about inside versus outside binds. These are two inside binds. I'm hiding behind my sword. The threat is shielded from me by this weapon. When I do this is an outside bind for me, right? He is still threatening me. If I take away a lot of this energy, that does a lot, but if he's really, really committed, this is still a possibility. All of this is still a possibility, which is why there's another component to this, which is this sort of finishing action, right? So that becomes actually pretty important, just to make sure that this side is actually closed out.
Do you want to show that again?
Yeah, one more time. Okay. And
so it beats my blade down, essentially.
Yeah, beats or pushes, yeah.
And for anyone who's not aware as well, anything that forces a blade down because the hand is connected to the shoulder, anything that pushes a blade down brings it away from the opponent because of that natural arc at the pivot point of the shoulder.
Right. So one of the things that I talk about a lot with thinking about the system holistically is, yeah, like having a really good idea for what Krump is, obviously important. Same thing for all the different master cuts, but it's also the interconnection that's really important. So part of the whole interconnectivity, you can think about often from this key question: what's next? What's the next thing, right? So I think there's an assumption a lot of the time you're going to do a technique and then be done, and maybe the person's dead and you just stop. And we can probably talk about this in other videos. Like, rarely do we, do a strike and hit a person and then it's just done with no consequence, right? So the idea of like, what is the next motion is something I'm always asking. And I think it's particularly relevant here, where if you throw this in and I do this, there's another motion that I'm gonna do. And actually, what did it feel like was happening as I came around?
Well, I could feel I was very exposed here.
Absolutely.
So my weapon being down in this quarter, that's the most exposed quarter at this point. So I immediately want to pull my sword up to the
Exactly. So let's try something here. So I'm going to have you just do paired cuts from both sides. Okay. Yep. And you'll notice, oh, look, if I keep going, automatically, I come into a position where I can naturally transition into coverage on the other side with a Krumphau. So I think it's really, so I think about Krump really as sort of a cutting pattern. It's really more of a cutting pattern rather than a specific, just this to this, right? So I think that's a really key thing. And here's another thing, let's see if we can actually get this to happen. So nice and easy, nice and smooth, you're gonna go ahead and do that. And at some point, go ahead and double up on an attack, right? So, right, so go ahead. And then once you double up, just keep the alternating after that, okay?
Okay.
Okay?
So 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2.
So how did you feel after I did that transition in terms of danger?
I don't know.
Okay, so people will.
I was concentrating on trying to do the right number.
Absolutely. So people will hopefully be able to see it on the video. They will also hopefully be able to see. I
thought your point came online, I think.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
And in fact, so we can actually just chain these together. You just do the right hand.
Yeah,
yep. So here, I'm doing this, but if you repeat, I'm going to keep doing this, and all of a sudden this happens.
Which is a Winden sort of action.
Kind of, yes. We could definitely kind of stay on the blade and actually make that happen. But that was an example of the Schola, the squinter, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
So notice this motion, these dynamics, they fit together very, very nicely, but depending on your response, they can turn into something else organically in terms of what I'm doing. So I went from basically one master cut to another master cut. So
maybe we'll deal with the Schola in another video.
Possibly, absolutely. So that hopefully gives you a sense of the dynamics of Krump as a master cut. Would you like me to talk about basically 3 simple tactics that you would use these mechanics for?
Sure, let's go for it.
Yeah. So there's actually 4. The 4th tactic is like, how do you use Krump? How do you beat Krump? So that we'll probably save for another time. Check out my channel. We'll probably talk about that.
Yeah. Check out Jeff's channel anyway.
Yeah,
Actually, I'll stick a link down below.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. So, but in terms of just kind of dealing with the danger, right? So one of the things is supposed to be throwing the point to the hands, right? So this is a scenario where I'm sure you say this in your classes, like when you're attacking with the sword, what do you want to present first, the blade or the yourself,
blade.
Right?
Yeah. Don't lead with the hands,
right?
Because you'll get hit in the hands.
Well, so let me show you exactly what happens when you do that, right? So go ahead, boom, right? So we're being really careful here and gentle, and actually you'll notice I'm using the flat. This is one way to actually use a sword so that you can do it safely. And so we can actually do a little bit of a drill where Matt might, sort of as the coach, throw a normal sword, or at some point lead with the hands, and I need to make a decision, right? And I'm just going to continue. No, just do the same side.
Just do the number one.
Yep.
Right, cool.
Boom. Yep. I'm going to keep doing this. And at some point, if I see the hands, I just do the same thing, right? And the cool thing you kind of realize very quickly as the student, number one, my cognitive load for this becomes very low. It's like I'm doing the same mechanic over and over.
It's the same action, just a different target.
Yeah. Right. And actually the target is really important because now I am not targeting the sword or the hand, which is what most people do automatically. I'm thinking about center line. I'm thinking about I'm trying to like control the center as much as possible. And if you want to stick the hands out there, that's your choice. You know?
Coming from obviously a different traditions, but whether it's saber or longsword or anything else, I see this as like a clearing action actually, and it's a bit like just clearing the area in front of you, and regardless of what comes into that, whether it's the blade or the hands, you're just clearing it out of the way.
Absolutely. So, yep. So I'm able to sort of offer this open side so that there's something that comes in, but I have a good geometry to deal with it. Yep.
We actually have a very similar concept in Fury, for example, with the rabats coming from below, where usually the rabat is done to the sword, but if a person led with the hands, they'd get hit in the hands instead of the sword.
Absolutely.
But this sort of action is essentially a very similar thing, but coming from underneath.
Actually, that's a really good point. There's another term that I talk about on my channel, Aufstreichen or Streichen, which I think is actually probably very connected to that. Maybe another video, we'll see. So, so we just talked about two tactics with Krump. The last one is that angle obviously can vary, right? When you're throwing from the right, sometimes you can be a little bit more downward, and the more downward it is, the easier it is for me to get on top. If it gets more and more vertical, right, all of a sudden when I'm trying to do my thing, it's just a little hard to stay on this side, in which case don't, right? So from here, if I see this is where that sort of change in direction becomes really useful. Here, right? Okay. So now I actually switch to
Schola.
I would call that a Schola. The verses talk about cutting short. Meyer, Joachim Meyer in 1570 actually specifically defines this as the shortcut, right? So, but I would classify it as a shield actually. And actually the relationship between Krump and shield I think is actually really important and almost like a yin-yang kind of thing where it's like, in some cases you can actually look at like a Krump. So a lot of times you can look at it as a shield. They're very, it's almost like the pattern is the same and it's just the relationship on the opponent's sword that's really different. So this is where like I can go from here and then do this. Hopefully I hit, but even if I don't, then I can, again, I can just continue, right? So hopefully, and again, you can envision that sort of cueing drill. This is a sort of a 3 tactics drill that we do. So the coach will throw a normal Zorn, right? Or they throw with the hands, or they throw it just vertical enough that they can get underneath. And this is a great way to do basically a flow drill, one of the sort of frequens modus drills that we do, so that you can very gently increase the complexity on someone to be able to, it's not just these individual things, how do you mix them together in real time, right?
Cool.
So
good.
I think I've said a lot of stuff.
So hopefully you've now got some insight, and you can watch this video again if it wasn't all clear to you. But there was a lot of information packed by Jeff into that one video. So in a sentence, if someone asked you in a pub, what is a Krumphau? It's a crooked cut that essentially comes in on the inside of an opponent's blade, on the flat of their blade, that essentially diverts it, deflects it, in order to create an opening down the center line. But that could be aimed at their hands if they happen to lead with the hands as well. And for Furiists or people doing Vardi, these actions that we're used to doing from below, or Marozzo in fact, from below, it's similar, it's got some relationship to those rabat actions that come from below, but you're coming from above with the Krump. So there we go. Perhaps that was clear as mud, perhaps it was clear as crystal. Get commenting in the comments down below, and thanks a lot to Jeff for that. And check out his channel as well, where you'll find probably a lot more in-depth explanations of lots of these things. And there we go, you've got some German longsword material on my channel, which is not something you get very often, but hopefully you'll be getting some more. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, thanks Jeff, and see you back on the channel really soon. Cheers folks. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers folks.